This is a troll. He's griefing the game because he doesn't actually enjoy D&D, he just likes getting negative reactions out of people. And this is an angry player who just wants a normal game. Who wins? Let's find out. Roll post. This guy was the most problematic troll I've ever dealt with. I heard from a friend of mine, who we will call Amir, that there was a D&D group accepting players and I could join. Amir was a close friend of mine. Unfortunately, he also invited another player, who we will dub Troll. Session 0 begins. Unbeknownst to the rest of us, during Session 0, Troll got the DM to agree on a plot twist that was just the worst. My girlfriend, Lilith, was in the game with us. Her character is a monk, mine's a paladin. Our characters were a brother-sister duo. After we announced our characters, Troll rolled an older monk. We didn't think much of it at the time, but privately, at some point after Session 0, without telling any of us, Troll asked the dungeon master if he could make his character me and Lilith's father as a plot twist. For some unknown reason, without consulting any of us players, the DM agreed. On its own, that may not seem all that distasteful, but all of his actions leading up to that point made us loathe him. So that reveal was a total campaign killer. No, wait, hold on. I disagree. This did seem all that distasteful. It's common for DMs to want to spring plot twists on players, and that's usually fine, but this is different. You and I already know this, but you need to color within your lines. If you're gonna color someone else's backstory, most of the time you gotta run it by them. As a general rule, don't spring surprise plot twists about people's characters without informing the player behind it first. There are specific instances where it's okay to do that, but it is not most of the time. Our first session began shortly after. The story was standard fantasy fare. The world depends on a magic disc. This disc contains the code and the data of the universe simulation that we're living in. But the disc disappeared one day, and the universe has been glitching and acting strange ever since. Our goal was to find the disc and put it back in the drive where it belongs. We set off on our first stop. We need to find an old sage, who is the closest lead that we know, to inquire where the drive is located. Just as soon as I criticize the DM for poor form, he goes and makes a genuinely interesting campaign with an easy-to-follow quest structure. It isn't the first rule of DMing, but if anyone's listening that hasn't run a game before or could use some sage advice, whether they know it or not, OP actually just wrote the simplest way to create compelling and fun campaigns that your players will have no trouble following. The players need to reach X, but to do that, they first need to do Y, in hopes that this will get them closer to achieving Z. This is the most common quest or story structure that exists because it works. You just keep threading the needle with X's and Y's until they eventually, one day, accomplish Z at the end of that story arc. Lastly, I also want whatever OP has been reading if he thinks this is standard fantasy. It seems more like a fantasy adventure cloaked in sci-fi. Anyways, where were we? The first session begins. We all introduced our characters. Theirs were standard fantasy characters. Troll was an incontinent, senile, decrepit old monk who proclaimed himself the Master Hermit. He had a special way of making the people around him uncomfortable. He knew exactly how to step on our toes, but not so egregiously that we could do anything about it. He would simply passive-aggressively troll us in such a way that if we said anything, we would be the ones making a scene. I don't know if this makes any sense, but if you know, you know. A couple scraps and a trailblaze later, and we find ourselves at the home of the sage. We introduce ourselves and ask where the drive is. The DM plays the sage as a delirious old man who speaks in riddles and rhymes. I think the whole rhyming thing is cringe, but internally resolved to handle things as diplomatically as I could. Tell us where we can find the drive and you will be rewarded. Ah, yes, the drive. You must render your services to me, and I will grant thee the location. You have to be kidding me, you old bat. We went through so much trouble to get here in the first place. The other players, including Lilith, gave me a look of approval. We were all hoping to progress, and we were getting tired of this wild goose chase. Very well. Then you must surrender to me something special. A prized possession. Something magic. Then we heard a voice from across the table. It was Troll.
I can let you put it in my mouth.
It was so awkward. Nobody laughed. The silence was deafening. Everybody just looked at Troll in a range from barely amused to confusing, and then finally disgusted. No, it needs to be magic.
Oh, come on, don't be a prude. Let me show you what magic these gums can work.
He asked to roll for seduction. Then, for some reason, the DM uncritically permitted it. He apparently rolled high enough because the DM just said, "Fade to black, you now have a map with the drive's location marked in red." Maybe it's not that he rolled high enough, but that the DM was so disgusted at the idea of continuing this plot line that he just gave OP what he wanted to shut him out. If you want a double dose of cringe, just remember that every time I have to narrate a weird pervert creep doing something awful, I have a lot of friends and family that watch this channel too. I thought that after a few years of doing this content that eventually I'd become numb to the weird stuff people try to pull, but it doesn't get less weird ever. While we're disappointing our parents, Old Man's Gummy Blowjob could be a funny bit in some games, but the overwhelming majority of people would just get really uncomfortable, especially if you just drop this on an otherwise normal game without warning. Our adventure spans several games. Troll must have known that he was cutting our patience thin because he didn't do anything wrong for a while aside from being a bit obnoxious. Until we finally made it to the drive. We search for the disk that contains all the world's data, but as we expected, the disk is gone. There were signs of a struggle, blood and weapons scattered on the ground. After a deep investigation, we find a glimmering golden compass on the ground.
No, hold on. I'll be taking that.
Why? You're not even a spellcaster.
Just trust me, the payoff is huge, I promise.
All eyes were on him. He took the compass and put it in his mouth. Rolling his strongest strength check, he crunched down on it, chewing on the compass. Are you eating the compass?
Nuh-uh.
Get him! We attempted to drag him to the ground. We had to roll against his strength save, but the DM hit him with disadvantage as he did have a compass in his mouth. We dragged him to the ground and tried to force it out of him. His roll failed. Gums and mouth bleeding, he clenched his jaw tighter as the rest of the party grappled and rolled checks to try and pry his mouth open. The DM says that if he doesn't remove the metal and glass shards and get immediate medical attention, he will take damage until he dies. So, he did what any sane person would do. He swallowed it. He swallowed the compass. The DM described constant bleeding from his mouth and throat until he succumbed to his wounds and dropped to 0 hit points and rolled death saves. He succeeds and gains 1 health. This might be the grossest story I've ever read, and somehow, so far, it's all centered on this guy's mouth. Speaking of, I don't think Troll gets to come back to life here. He should have continued taking damage and failing death saves because of it. Just because he passed out doesn't mean the bleeding stopped. If I were the DM, I would take this golden opportunity to kill his character without any fallout or drama. He walked right into it and chose to take himself out. This DM suffers from something I did when I was new and still do today, though to a smaller degree, and that is appeasement. The thought that if we just let the problem person get away with it this time, then they will finally get it out of their system and stop, But historically, appeasement doesn't tend to work. Instead, the aggressor sees it as progress and expands their behaviors. Anyways, where were we? With him distracted by a bleeding slumber, we actually got a chance to investigate the site. We made our investigation rolls and began our search. Judging by the armor and bloodstains littering the ground, burnt bodies, burnt trees, and grass, and only one pair of footprints leaving the scene, we determined that one entity, probably a humanoid, most likely a caster or pyromancer, single-handedly took down the guards and stole the disc, then retreated north towards the mountains. We couldn't waste any time, but just before we left, a decision had to be made. I insisted that we leave him for dead. Amir and another player both said that we need to take him with us, and it would be wrong to leave him behind. Lilith was neutral. We put him on a sled and dragged him northwards with us. While we were resting at our camp after a long day of voyaging, Troll comes too. We get him into a sit-down. I personally walk right up to him and explain that if he tries any of that ever again, we are not going to save him. You are a burden this party has to bear. I don't know why, but the others insist on keeping you around. If it were up to me, we would have left you behind. You can stay with us, but only on a tight leash. This was socially acceptable because I kept it in roleplay and my character was already an angry war vet, so this kind of speech was probably expected by this point. He just laughed and hand-waved it with an, "Oh, I don't think you know who you're talking to, son. I should be commanding you, for you see, I am your father." I looked at him confused. What? No, you're not. Yes, I am. DM, back me up here. The DM shrugged and said, I was saving that reveal for later, but yeah. I was confused and felt like this troll got to rewrite my character, but even worse was that there wasn't even an apology for almost throwing the entire mission, just spitting on my character's backstory. Yeah, DMs watching, don't do this. I already commented on this before, but it should be obvious by now that the troll is not acting in good faith. If I were the DM, I would simply nix that part. It sucks to go back on your word, but the troll is obviously not playing the same game as everybody else. No other players even seemed a little surprised. They agreed with everything I was saying. They just didn't say it out loud because they were introverted pushovers afraid of social backlash. But I wasn't. After he dismissively chuckled off throwing the game, I resolved to counter his trolling, slight him the same way he did us. Death by 1,000 cuts. So, my speech was delivered and I led the way into the mountains, which trailed deep into a cavern. This was by far the most fun and interesting part of the campaign. The drive has been gone for days at this point, so reality was glitching. It was just a fun dungeon to play in. Of course, Troll had something to say about it. He didn't really do anything wrong. He instead made cringeworthy jokes that just irritated me. But then, while we were walking through the hall, the portcullis dropped. The party got split into 3 groups. The DM must have thought he was funny because I got grouped with the troll. The session ended and the DM said that he would run a special session for each of the groups. Okay, cool, finally something nice. This is a very good idea for 3 reasons. 1, it allows the players to better explore their individual relationships with their own character and the one other character that they are teamed up with. Their interactions will be much more focused on the 2 characters as people rather than the whole party as a unit. 2, it cuts 66% of the fat out of the session. If the DM just ran a session where each of the groups take turns having their own mini-adventure, that would leave 2/3 of the party bored doing nothing. This move cuts all of the weight out and gets everyone right on track. 3, It gives the party 2 weeks to recharge and get hyped for the next session. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I guarantee that they will just be itching to get back into the game when they regroup. This DM sounds like he knows what he's doing. The session began. It was me and the troll versus a sprawling library maze. The DM set up a map on the table so we could see where we were going, but he would occasionally rotate a piece, changing the maze. As we walked closer to the exit, books would fly off of the shelves and hit us, shelves would fall on us, and traps would spring if we didn't make our saves. Speaking of, at one point he stepped on a pile of books and they slowly dragged him into the ground like quicksand. He failed his save spectacularly, accelerating his descent. I won't lie, I was tempted to leave him there. Nobody would know until it was already over, and they couldn't mention it in roleplay because their characters would never know either. I wouldn't even have to lie about it. All I would have to say is, he fell into a trap and died. But I would later regret that I did save him. I stabbed into the books, killing them. Then it was only a matter of dragging him out. I look back on this as the moment our campaign died. But the strangest part of this whole thing was that Troll got up, thanked me genuinely, and was actually pretty tolerable. We bonded somewhat in character, and while I still didn't like him, I no longer felt hostile by the end of it.
Thanks for the help. You could have left me, but you didn't. I know you don't like me for some reason, but I hope one day we can be friends.
I was a little annoyed at the "for some reason" addition, but I was just shocked that he didn't immediately spit on the hand that saved him. He was still a touch annoying, but he was also playing a character after all. I was playing a character with a mean streak, he was playing a character with self-awareness issues. We shook on it and resolved to clear this maze as a team. This alliance lasted about 10 seconds. We continued the crawl, won a battle, and were nearly there when suddenly, boss fight. Blocking the exit was a giant golem made of shelves and books, surrounded by books that were flying around it, flapping like bats. We rolled initiative. It was going to be a hard-fought battle no matter what we did. We gave as good as we got. As the paladin, I was drawing as many hits as I could, using all of my available spells, and pushing my character to the absolute limit to survive, while Troll was dancing around the ads. Then, the penultimate showdown. It was me and Troll versus the boss. I told the Troll to kite around him while I kept his attention. I went down soon after I said that, but the golem's back was turned to Troll. Seizing this opportunity, Troll ran away? Troll ran away. He ditched me and left me for dead after everything that we have just been through. The boss was almost dead. I had dealt so much damage and Troll still had most of his health and resources. There was no reason for this betrayal. Dude, he's right there. Where are you going?
Fighting him is a drag. I don't feel like it.
Are you kidding me?
My character would run away in this situation. He's actually quite cowardly.
Given his propensity for eating magic items and antagonizing people for no reason, I somehow doubted that. Regardless, he ran away. The session ended immediately after. The DM informed me that night that the golem thought I was dead, so I lived. He wrote a 1-page mini-story about my character crawling back out of the cave, escaping by the skin of my teeth. I didn't feel good about it. It felt like a cheap cop-out ending, but whatever. Then came the session where we were all supposed to get back together. The DM offered me to join at the start as if nothing happened, but no, I was pissed. I'm still pissed just thinking about it. So I opted to rejoin them later and let Troll explain why he didn't return with my character while I was sitting right there at the table. I wanted to make this as awkward as possible. He just said that I went down and he had to run for his life. I knew he was lying. The DM knew he was lying. but neither of us told the party. At this point, I'm so furious with him that I was actually calm. I would have my revenge. About halfway through the session, the DM describes my character bloodied, using his sword as a cane, limping towards camp.
OP, you're back! So good to see you, Fred! Wow!
At this point, I knew he was trolling, so I wasn't going to give him the reaction that he was looking for. I just described my character making his way to his tent, then falling asleep. My new plan was, play totally normal, don't give him any reactions, but try to get him to kill himself off. Knowing him, it wouldn't take long. In only 2 short sessions, I got my chance. We arrived at the MacGuffin, the disc. All we needed to do was take the disc, place it back in the drive, and then we win. Now, I'm sure the DM had a whole thing planned out for the journey back to the drive, but those plans didn't exactly get to pan out, because you will never guess what Troll decided to do when we beat the pyromancer guarding the disc. Troll took the capsule with the disc, and you guessed it, he ate it. I didn't even try to stop him this time. If the party's so eager to keep him alive, they can deal with it. Which, of course, they didn't. He got a couple awkward laughs of, dude, are you serious? But aside from that, nobody actually put their foot down. That's when the proverbial light bulb appeared over my head. We still have the disc. It's just inside him. Hey, Troll, I'm gonna need that disc back. I draw my sword.
Just wait 8 hours and it will return.
I'm so exhausted with his gross jokes and trolling that I don't inquire further. I just attack. To my pleasant surprise, nobody tries to stop me. I think I know why. By the sound of it, they've been at each other's throats since the beginning. If I were at the table, I would be thrilled that one of them is about to leave. It's good to stand up to people who make the game suck, and if OP was being this reactive towards any other type of that guy, he would be perfect. But when somebody is obviously trying to get a reaction out of you, the best thing to do is see if you all can just politely inform him that this group is not a good fit for him. But unfortunately, that's not always how it gets to work out, like in this situation. I am surprised that nobody else wants to stop the troll, but I'm also not going to deny that some people are just not great at voicing their concerns. Anyways, this is the final showdown. It was hardly a match. He obviously didn't put much effort into his character and was folded like a lawn chair. While he was unconscious, I got down on my knees, readied my knife, and prepared to gut him to retrieve the disc. It was then that the DM stopped me and said, "If you're going to do this, you will kill him." I just said, "Yes, that's half the point."
Wait, no, you can't do that. It's against the rules.
But the DM didn't stop me. He was dead. For some reason, everybody else's mood got dampened, like I did something wrong. We took a couple weeks break from the campaign, and that was the end of him playing with us. He didn't show up to the next session. Our campaign is still going to this day, and it has been much smoother since. What's funny is, this is what happens when one person grabbed the game by the balls and forced the guy to leave. Imagine how much longer this story would be if everyone sat on the sidelines like most of the party did. The difference between one-off stories like this and large sagas spanning several videos is that OP wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty and mess with the game a little to get this guy removed. But if nobody had the guts to put a stop to it as early as this guy did, then I would have gotten a lot more content out of it, so, that's fine. If you have a story to share, email it to me or post it on r/CritCrab on Reddit. And as always, thanks for watching.